This is my version of a sub-irrigated planter. Found a lot of videos on YouTube about making these. I found one I really liked, made by a Canadian fella. Really liked the materials that he used and his ideas. I didn't really like the execution. It was a little sloppy. So this is just my take on it. Found this at Target. Sterilite 18-gallon container. This is made out of polypropylene. You can find out what kind of plastic you're working with by looking on the bottom of the container. There's a little triangle under there. It's the little recycle symbol. This one's got a 5 in it. It's made out of polypropylene. It's a food-grade plastic. It's not actually a food-grade container, but it's made out of the same materials. You're not going to be actually storing food in this thing, but you don't want any chemicals in it that are leaching out into the soil. Same thing with your pipe. This is a black ABS pipe. It's called Cellcore here locally at any of the stores that I found it at. This I bought at Granger. I bought a 10-foot section. It was almost enough to do all 4 planters. Knowing what I know now, I probably could have made it last and done all 4 planters, but I just ran a little bit short on my last planter. When you go to your plumbing supply stores, where I suggest you go for this, that's where I found it again, and it's about half the price that I found it at Granger. This is about 2 feet. You've got 6 pieces in the bottom at 2.5 inches each. Guys, so roughly 3 or 4 feet, but depending on the size of your container, how tall your container is. And then I've got some pots. These were just pots that used to contain plants that we bought at the store. I just saved the pots for germinating seeds, and these guys were perfect for going to the bottom down there. Some of the planters I've seen use several small cups or several smaller planters or pots. This one I'm just using one larger planter in the bottom. It seems to work out fine for the last one I built, so that's what I'm doing on this one. I did cut this down a little bit. As you can see, that line represents, well, I guess that's about 3 inches. It's a little bit taller than these guys because I wanted it to stick up into the soil a little bit further. This is where your soil is going to go down into the water. It wicks up the water into the rest of the planter. One right in the center seems to work for me. The tools that I use, pretty basic tools. I have a pair of tin snips, not really necessary, but these made it a lot easier to trim all around the edges and whatnot. Utility knife, this is essential. You really can't build it without this. Good sharp blade, or several good sharp blades. I used a drill, this pretty small bit for drilling the drain hole, and a larger bit for drilling the holes in the base. This is a reamer. I'll show you what that's for in a second. And a pen for marking stuff. This is what I used for measuring and marking the hole in the center for my pot. What I did was measure the pot where it's going to pass through the bottom base in the planter, divide it in half, and I used this like a compass. It's got these 2 sharp points on it. This is, I think, an old piece of crap garage tool. This is not very precise at all, so I didn't care if I messed it up at all. Just use this as a compass, and there was this hole in the center where the plastic was injected into the mold. I just stuck it right in the center of that hole and marked it out. And then I cut it with a utility knife. To cut the base free from the lid, there's a line right here, all the way around this lid. And all I did was score right along that line, and it made a perfect template. This thing almost drops right down in to the bin where you need it to go. Just a little bit of trimming around here in the edges and whatnot. After I cut these out, I made 3 of them. So what I did was stack all 3 on top of each other and drill all your holes. Now I did these small holes. I've seen a lot of people use rather big drill bit. I didn't like that idea because I didn't want a lot of soil dripping falling through the base into the water. I wanted to try and maintain as much soil in the planter as possible. So I used a lot of little holes. It's very time consuming. It took me a lot of breaks, my hands cramping up, and it is really messy. You end up with, as you can see on this one, I haven't cleaned up yet, but all these holes have a lot of flashing. It's plastic that sticks out. That's what I use the reamer for. You drop the reamer in each hole and you knock the little pieces of junk off the edges there. This, again, very time consuming. My hands cramped up while I was doing it, watching TV, took a lot of breaks. Made a really big mess. You see this crap all over my carpet. A ton of it in here. I've already thrown out a bunch of it. Make sure you clean that up before your wife gets home. The 6 2.5 inch standards inside here, I glued those down with 100% silicone. This is some stuff I had laying around. It didn't really work very well. It doesn't stick to this polypropylene at all. It sticks really well to the ABS. I don't know if maybe the ABS is more porous, but the polypropylene did not stick at all. Probably going to use something different next time, like a hot glue, but I don't have a hot glue gun, so I used what I had. This is where you drop it inside. You want to get your 6 2.5 inch standards first, drop it down inside, and just start trimming around these edges to get this to fit real nice. One thing I'll tell you is I tried to use a heat gun, which is way hotter than a blow dryer, hair dryer. This stuff does not bend when it gets hot. It heated up, it bent a little bit. As soon as it cooled, it snapped right back into shape. There was no point in doing it. I figured if I could heat it and push it down in here and mold it real well, it just didn't work. So you're going to have to trim out around these edges just by hand, marking it with a marker, whatever. What I did was use a straight edge on this one, marked across there, and I used that as a guide so I could get the edges pretty close. I'm kind of precise about cutting stuff. Like I said, I wanted everything to fit as nice and tight as possible, so when I put dirt in here, as little as possible falls through the edges and through the holes. The pot that I cut down, this pot was probably a couple inches taller here, and when you drop it down inside this hole, you can see it kind of sticks up a little bit, but plus, once you put dirt in here, this plant, the base is going to push down a little bit. So, you're going to fill this up with dirt, pack it in there real good. That's what's going to wick the water up into the rest of the soil. The edge over here is where I cut out the space for the fill pipe. Now the fill pipe, I cut a notch out of it. This has got two angles on it. That's a 45 degree and roughly a 22.5 degree angle on it. And then I marked the back side here with a black line. That black line is so I know how to orient it once I drop it in there. And it fits nice and snug up against the edge. I saw in some videos where people were drilling holes in the sides here and securing this with a zip tie. Not really necessary, because when you fill this up with dirt, it's going to hold this out to the outside anyways. I wasn't really worried about it. Now this is where the lid comes in. I use a piece of black trash bag that I cut down to the right size, and I lay that on top of the dirt and it overhangs the sides. Then I drop this lid on top and it holds the trash bag down. It seems to work really well. I've seen other people use zip ties or tape, gigantic rubber bands. I figured just use this lid. It's already there. It's going to provide a little bit more stability too, because once you fill this up with dirt, the dirt's going to be pushing on the outside of the planter, and this will help prevent it from bowing out in the centers. Might make it a little easier to tote it around. These things are pretty heavy once they're full. When you measure this, make sure you do it with the lid on if you're going to use the lid. The last one I made too short. It's really difficult to get to with the plants in here. I also didn't want it too tall, because then you've got in the way of your canopy of your plant whenever you've got planted in here. Now before you go filling this thing up with dirt, what I did for the drainage hole, take all this crap out of here. Just take one of your 2.5 inch pieces of pipe and drop it down in here in the corner. That'll give you an idea of how high the base is going to be and how high you want your water. And you want to get as much water in here as possible, because trust me, these planters are really thirsty. You're going to be filling this thing up all the time. I've heard once a week. That's a load of crap. These things drink way more water than filling it up once a week. I end up filling this thing up at least once a day. Sometimes I fill it up in the morning and I fill it up again at night, so I don't have to worry about it the next day. My schedule means I'm gone for a full day at a time, so I'm going to make sure they're going to be watered. Just take your piping, drop your 2.5-inch piece of pipe in there, and you can drill it from the inside, doesn't matter. I did it on the same side where I put my fill tube. That way as you're filling it up, you can see it drain back out the hole and you know when to stop. Well, that's the easiest way. If you've already got it full, and screwed up, or not able to, you can measure up from the bottom here maybe and just drill a hole that way. Hole doesn't have to be real big. I use a pretty small drill bit here. Just poke a little hole in the side. That's all it really needs to be, just to let it leach out. Plus, if it rains and you get more water in it than it can handle, it can drain out that way. Here's my little squash in a sub-irrigated planter. These things really took off once I put them in here. I had them growing in pots for a while, and they started to get pretty big in the pots, so I had to get them in here pretty quick. Here's a fill tube down here that's kind of obstructed by the plant. Something to think about when you're putting plants into a sub-irrigated planter like this. That thing's really hard to get to now. With this plant here is growing right over top of it. If you've got like a garden hose, you can stick the garden hose down in there. I have to fill these up right now with a pitcher of water. It's kind of a pain. I got a couple fruit over there that are growing, getting pretty big. I just harvested 2 off of this and ate them the other day. They're quite delicious. Looks like I need to fill the reservoir up. These leaves are wilting a little bit.